I don't think anybody could really believe it at first. Why would anybody want to hurt or harm or kill this lovely, talented young woman?
I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear. The thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and a warm welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. A picture, as they say, tells 1,000 words. There was really no shortage of photos and videos of Colin and Mo, both high-profile cycling stars and online brand ambassadors. Colin Strickland for Red Bull and Mo Wilson for Specialized. The mystery was always Kaitlin. Kaitlin scrubbed her online presence early on. It seems like there was an insider, a mutual friend of theirs, that possibly provided some photos from his own social media to 48 Hours. And so what we see, and it's basically 15 minutes worth of photos that sort of cycle through for the entire episode. What we see, though, is further confirmation that Kaitlin was big into cycling herself. In fact, this insider describes her as being addicted to cycling. We know from what was said during the trial that on the morning of the murder, Kaitlin went cycling with Colin and a third person, but she was quickly dropped, and Colin then said something along the lines of, "Don't worry about her." Later that same day, Colin hung out with a far better female cyclist than Kaitlin, not only an up-and-coming champion, but someone younger and better educated. Basically, Kaitlin was being outshone by a new model. Before we get to the rest of this analysis, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Incidentally, I've had second thoughts about talking about this whole Cyber Sleuths documentary. I think it basically speaks for itself, and I think it's a conversation I've had quite often, and I don't really think I need to make the points that I've made previously. I think people are going to basically, it's not going to change anything if I say anything about it. I have shared my views on Patreon. I don't think I'm going to say any more about it on YouTube. In any event, if you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. Now, much of the new footage confirms in a way what we already knew, that cycling was the giant sphere that sucked in Colin, Kaitlin and Mo, and that without the cycling, if you just took that away, there would likely have been no triangle, no murder. The cycling effectively created a competitive dynamic to Kaitlin's relationship with Colin, and one that she was never going to win against Mo. This is also why Kaitlin not only killed Mo in a display of dominance. Remember, even when Mo was deceased, Kaitlin stood over her and shot her in the heart. But she also tossed out Mo's bike. That maneuver alone possibly cost Kaitlin everything. It's incredible that Kaitlin's DNA remained on the bicycle despite it being hurled into a bamboo thicket and potentially being contaminated. There's also some good photos of the bicycle in the 48 Hours documentary that we haven't actually seen. We haven't seen the bicycle in this way before. It's almost invisible, almost completely submerged within the leaves of this thicket. Now, there were two aspects I found disappointing in terms of the 48 Hours documentary, and then one that I thought was done quite well. So let's look at those. Number one, they didn't really show the body cam where Colin is first told that Mo's been a victim of a homicide. So they clearly have the body cam, they just didn't really seem to do much with it. I've seen it, and it appears Colin could have done the math, should have done the math, certainly in my opinion. Did he know in an instant what had actually happened? But only he knows for sure what was going on in his mind. It is interesting how when the officer asks him if he knows Anna, and then then he says Mo, Colin says Anna Mo. I'm not sure how many Moes there are in the world, but just hours earlier, Strickland was with Mo. He starts off by saying no, until the officer gets her name just right. And in this little interaction, I think you get quite a good sense of who Colin Strickland is. He's a somewhat complicated fellow. There's also some, I think, ambivalence, perhaps even insecurity, in how he deals with certain things. And perhaps when there's something that's not good news, perhaps he's in a little bit of denial. You might say that is true about all of us, but it is true in a particular way, I think, for this individual.
Do you know Anna? Mo.
Anna Mo.
Yeah, everybody calls her Mo. Monique, last name is Wilson. Writer, she's a gravel writer.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
There's also a silly moment somewhere in the documentary where a woman asks rhetorically, why would anyone want to hurt this lovely, talented young woman? I played that clip at the beginning. Let me play it again.
I don't think anybody could really believe it at first. Why would anybody want to hurt or harm or kill this lovely, talented young woman?
I mean, are you kidding me? You've answered your question in your own words. Why? Because she was lovely, because she was talented, because she was young. Those are the three reasons Kaitlin murdered her. Because in Kaitlin's own estimation, and perhaps her estimation of what Colin may have felt, Mo was lovelier, Mo was more talented, Mo was younger. And obviously lovelier on a bicycle as well, obviously more talented on a bicycle as well, and yes, younger. But bicycles were Kaitlin's boyfriend's world, so it was specifically the talented aspect on a bicycle, lovelier on a bicycle, right? And remember, it was basically how Colin earned a living. And so Kaitlin was figuring that part out. This is someone who I can't compete with as soon as she gets onto a bicycle. And remember, Kaitlin at 34, 35 would be very aware of the youthfulness of the younger, lovelier, more talented, this rival, because she was starting to think big thoughts such as settling down and starting a family. And one of the things she needed to do was get Colin to do the same thing, to put Colin in that mode. And then this young rider comes along that distracts him, not only from Kaitlin, but from this whole settled aspect. And remember, Kaitlin is effectively living with Colin, and all of that seemed to be on the cards, this whole thing of settling down. When Mo, a threat, a rival, but more particularly a threat and a rival in areas that her beau cared about, and areas where Kaitlin just felt she couldn't compete. So Kaitlin felt helpless in that area. And I say this many times, we examine a case, it goes to trial, and then when it comes out the other side, documentaries examine it, the media try to make sense of it, and actually, if we're honest, they seldom do. They seldom figure out the why. They seldom can explain what really happened in something when one's been paying attention to it for weeks and months and years, which I think says a lot about a society that can't seem to figure itself out, especially when things go wrong. And so when you see Colin facing that officer in his open garage, and he can't seem to figure things out, even though you kind of think, well, you should, that is, I think, just emblematic of our society. We can't seem to figure things out when we should. Why can't we? Why don't we? 48 Hours did a little better in reading into Kaitlin's body language while being interrogated. The rigid effect to start off with. The silent nodding when she was told her vehicle was seen at the scene. Her lack of questions about what happened. Her lack of curiosity. Incidentally, Colin also seemed to quickly accept what had happened once it had happened, once he was told about the homicide in his own driveway. He didn't seem to need to know how Mo was killed or want to know. And doesn't that say something? So I'm not going to take it further than that in terms of this 48 Hours documentary. I do want to say something that's been on my heart for quite a long time. As someone who is into cycling, I've also got a specialized mountain bike. I've done a lot of riding in my life. I've done triathlons. I've done a couple of Ironmans and half Ironmans. And so I'm very aware of the whole sport thing and the sport psychology. And so to come across Colin Strickland, who is a super tough bike racer, he's got great stamina, he's got great endurance, he's got staying power. And then you think about those qualities and you take them into this situation. This is someone who can push through the pain and discomfort better than most. And now he's in this awkward situation in terms of this whole legal thing. And how does he perform in this arena? And in the context of a murder investigation into someone that one would think cared about, I can't say that I saw any of that. True crime can be exhausting, especially when you write books about it as I have. It can be very draining. Criminal trials can be energy-sapping ultramarathons. Like gravel riding, prosecuting a case requires discipline, focus, and dedication. It requires standards and ethics. I would have liked to see a sportsman put these qualities into the legal arena, to see justice done, to see the story told, to help other people, other lives. Instead, and this is just my impression, I got the impression that he seemed preoccupied with what he'd lost and how this affected him, rather than taking responsibility without facing any kind of charges, just taking responsibility for what looks from certain perspectives to be a central role in the whole thing. From almost a benign perspective, just not communicating to those around him how he felt. And you can imagine if he was just quite transparent about that, how many potential relationships that were in trouble could have been, to some extent, given the therapy they needed by people looking on in this case. And perhaps he didn't know how he felt, but nevertheless, he benefited from keeping both these women in the dark until, of course, no one benefited. And so as a result of whatever you want to call them, games, ploys, strategies, a weakness, just a failure to do something, whatever you want to call it, 3 lives have been irrevocably destroyed. Also, let's not forget, someone thought it was a brilliant idea to go out and buy guns. 4 months later, 3 lives destroyed permanently. And I suspect if that simple thing didn't happen, just being in a situation of minus an easy-to-use murder weapon, that everything being the same people, same scenarios, everything, you just take the guns out of the equation. And Kaitlin finds herself furious. Kaitlin has figured out what Colin's doing despite him not telling her the truth. And she simply is minus an easy-to-use murder weapon. She doesn't have access to one. There's not one in her home. What do you think is going to happen? Well, I would suspect that Caitlin's fury would have had time to pass and to settle. And instead of confronting Mo, she probably would have confronted Colin, and probably a confrontation that was needed. A talk. And everything then would have settled in some way or another. And all 3 of these people would still be well on their way to a happily ever after. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.